Okay, so now we're going to talk about phase shifts. Basically, what it does is it moves the endpoint, or it moves the graph up and down. The graphs of y equals a sine bx minus c and y equals a cosine bx minus c have the following characteristics, assuming b is greater than 0. The left endpoint, bx minus c equals 0. The right endpoint is the left endpoint plus the period. So, all right, if x does not have a coefficient, okay, if x does not have a coefficient, then the shift is the opposite of whatever constant. So see how it says x minus pi over 3? The opposite of minus pi over 3 would be plus pi over 3. So the left end point is at pi over 3. All right, the long way of doing it is you would set x minus pi over 3 equal to 0. That's the way that works for everything, and we're going to use when we have a coefficient, and then solve for x. Okay, now the period is 2 pi. I know that because the coefficient is 1. So b is 1, so 2 pi over b. What you have to do is you have to add that to the left endpoint to get your right endpoint. Okay, so that's what you're doing. Well, since we have a fraction, since we all enjoy fractions, I've got to find a common denominator. If I double the 3, I get 6. So 2 pi is equivalent to 6 pi over 3. So when I add it, pi over 3 plus 6 pi over 3, I have 7 pi over 3. So what you're going to do is realize you can't start at 0 anymore. So that's my pi over 3. And that's my 7 pi over 3. Okay? Now, the midpoint. Easiest way to do it. Add your numerators. If they're even, cut that in half. So like 1 pi and 7 pi is 8 pi. Halfway would be 4 pi. So 4 pi over 3 is your halfway point. Now we're going to do the same thing to get our quarter points. So this would be 1 pi over 4 pi divided by 2. The problem is 1 pi over 4 pi is an odd number, 5 pi. So instead of cutting that in half, same thing as dividing by 2 is multiply the denominator by 2. So 1 pi plus 4 pi is 5 pi. And then I just double my denominator. If I double 3, I have 6. Same thing over here. 4 pi plus 7 pi is 11 pi, which is odd. And I got 11 pi over 6. All right? Now, amplitude's 1/2. Okay, which means my range is going to go from negative 1/2 to 1/2. All right? So, cosine starts at the maximum and ends at the minimum. So 1/2, and ends also at the maximum, sorry, so that's going to start and end at 1/2. At the halfway point, it'll be at its minimum, which is negative 1/2. Quarter points are zeros, and all I'm going to do is connect them. Okay? And then again, repeat yourself. So the period's 2 pi, so I'm going to add 6 pi over 3 to that. So 13 pi over 3. And then kind of eyeball anything. You don't have to label that with axes. All right? You don't have to label that with axes, but quarter 0, half min, quarter 0, boom. I got my graph. Okay, now when there is a coefficient, 2x plus pi over 2 equals 0. 2x equals negative pi over 2. X equals negative pi over 4. Okay? That's always going to happen when we're adding a positive number. The horizontal shift always goes the opposite direction. The vertical shift is going to go the same as the sine. So the domain is all real numbers. The range is associated with the amplitude, 2. So that's negative 2 to 2. The period is 2 pi divided by the coefficient. The pi over 2 has nothing to do with the period. So I do 2 pi divided by 2. I end up with pi. So my period is pi. My amplitude, the number directly in front of it, is 2. Now my left end point is the negative pi over 4 I got by setting whatever's inside parentheses equal to 0. My right end point comes from adding the period to that. So the period is pi, denominator 4, so if I add 4 to that, I'm going to be at 3 pi over 4. And then to get my other endpoint, I add the same 4 pi over 4 to get 7 pi over 4. All right, so sine starts at 0, ends at 0. Halfway between them is 0. 3 pi minus pi is 2 pi. Half of 2 pi is pi, so pi over 4 is the halfway point. All right, halfway with the quarter point. 1 pi minus pi is 0. 0 divided by 4 is 0, so that's my first quarter point. All right, my third quarter point. 1 pi plus 3 pi is 4 pi. Half of that is 2 pi. 2 pi over 4 reduces down to pi over 2. Sine starts at the minimum, or starts at 0. Halfway is 0, ends at 0. Quarter point is at its max. 3/4 point is at its min. Because the amplitude is 2, we're going to go from 2 to negative 2. And then we're just going to repeat ourselves with an eyeball. Doesn't have to be exact. Boom. All right. So, negative 3 sine x over 2 minus pi over 4. X over 2 minus pi over 4 equals 0. X over 2 equals pi over 4 when we add pi over 4 to both sides. X equals pi over 2. So my left end point is pi over 2, which makes sense because this is negative. So my left end point is going to be positive. My period, all right, my period, 2 pi over the coefficient of x, which is 1/2, which ends up being 4 pi. So my period is 4 pi. My denominator is 2. I multiply it by 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. My right end point is 9 pi over 2. My amplitude, the number in front without the negative, is 3. The domain is all real numbers. And then the range goes from negative 3 to 3. So my left end point is pi over 2. My right end point is 9 pi over 2. Which means my second cycle is going to end at 17 pi over 2, just continuing it. Sine starts at 0, doesn't matter what the amplitude is, as long as there's no vertical shift. Ends at 0. Halfway would also be at 0. 1 pi plus 9 pi is 10 pi. Half of that is 5 pi. 1 pi plus 5 pi is 6 pi. Half of that is 3 pi. Then you can either use you can do the same thing there, or use patterns. 1, 3, 5, blank 9. 7's missing. So that one's 7 pi over 2. It's up to you how you want to do it. All right. At the quarter point, it's usually there, but it's a negative. So instead of going up, it's going to go down. 7 pi over 2, which would normally be, if it wasn't a negative, its minimum. That flips to the maximum. So I got that graph. And then I kind of repeat myself, trying to hit as close as I can to midway between them to get my 0. And there's that. All right, negative 2 cosine x plus pi. Left end point is going to be negative pi. Period, since there's no coefficient, is 2 pi, because 2 pi divided by 1 is 1. Add 2 pi to pi, and we have positive pi, so that's our right end point. My domain is all real numbers. All right, now my range, because I have an amplitude of 2, is negative 2, 2. Remember, the negative has nothing to do with it. The period was the 2 pi, because it didn't have a coefficient.